there, books, welcome back to my channel. It is Friday afternoon, June 15th. We're here today for my Friday Reads video. I'm going to tell you about the books that I started, the books that I finished, and the books that I'm going to be reading in the upcoming days. This week I finished two books. The first book that I finished was No Place Like Here by Christina June. This is an arc I got from the publisher, and I wrote a review on my blogs. I'll link that in the description box down below, so if you'd like to read my thoughts as opposed to just hearing me talk about it here, I'll link that so you can check that out. This one is a young adult novel, kind of a Hansel and Gretel retelling. 16-year-old Ashlyn, she got in trouble the year before the novel started and she was sent away. Her parents sent her to boarding school and she's tried to keep her nose clean so that she could earn her return home. But right before it's time for her to return, someone shows her a newspaper article that shows that her father has gotten in trouble for tax evasion and is about to get jail time himself. So interesting, the comparison between what Ashlyn did and her punishment and her father's crime and his punishment. The fact is, however, that Ashlyn didn't hear about this from her parents. She's hearing about it from a newspaper. And so that's a little bit of an insight into the relationship or lack of relationship that Ashlyn has with her family. And so while she's been preparing for this summer return and being back with her friends from her hometown, she now finds herself being shipped off to cousins and shipped off to a summer job working on a summer camp retreat. And where she should have been having a relationship with her parents, she's now meeting these other parental figures, her aunt and uncle, and the cousin that she's going to be working with, and the adults that also work on the summer camp retreat. While young adult novels are often criticized for their lack of adult characters, here we have a myriad of adult characters, and it's interesting the relationship that develops, because this book tries to do everything in that we see relationships between adults, we see relationship between teens and adults, but it also has this very interesting literary component where Ashlyn is not really able to express herself verbally all the time. So she's kind of like the phantom scribbler, where everywhere she goes she leaves these written quotes, these literary quotes from other books, other characters that express some of what she's thinking or expresses her idea about a situation. And it's interesting to make the comparison between those other books and what Ashlyn is experiencing, but it also, of course, brings us back to that Hansel and Gretel retelling where she's leaving these literary breadcrumbs, hoping that someone will help her find her way back home. I love the fact that this title, it says No Place Like Here as opposed to No Place Like Home, because home is subjective. The next book I finished is Penelope Lively's Moon Tiger. This is a previous Man Booker winner from 1987. So I'm going to be filming my review of this one. It's going to be on the channel maybe in a couple of weeks. I need some time to think about everything that I want to say about this book. So for now, I'll just tell you, and it's about a 70-something-year-old woman who is sick. She's dying. She's lying on her deathbed, but she's a writer, historian, and over the course of her career, she's had many people say negative things about her, and the fact that she never went into academia, that she tried to build her career as independently as she could. And she's taken her attitude towards all the things that she's experienced and is projecting all of that onto a history of the world. So she's writing a history of the world, but personalized and contextualized by her own experiences. So as a historian, as a journalist, she traveled the world. She met a lot of people from lots of different places that personalize all the things that she wants to reflect from the history of the world. And so it's very interesting how she's writing that history and using her own life and the parts of her life that relate to the beginnings of the world and all the beginnings of turmoil and wars and political drama between countries. Fascinating. Interspersed between her recollections is also the present day happenings where she's being visited in the hospital by her family members, and we get to see the dramatic contrast between what she remembers about these people and how they relate to her now, the things that they leave, the things that they say. And because Claudia, even though she doesn't always interact with her visitors, she does hear them, she does record what they're saying. And yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit more about this when I do my review of the 1987 winner. Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively. So those are the two books that I finished this past week. I also made progress in two books that I started. I started a read along of Maya Angelou's memoirs. This is her second memoir, Gathered Together in My Name. I read the first memoir a few months ago, and now we're continuing with her second memoir. So I've been reading this book aloud and posting videos where I read the book aloud and sharing it with my audience. So we're now up to chapter 7, I think, is the chapter that I just posted. No, I don't think I've posted it yet, but I've recorded it. So I've been reading this one, and it's really interesting. Maya Angelou was just a fascinating person. And the fact that she stretched her memoir over 7 books gives us an opportunity to share the details of her life, the details of what she experienced, her thoughts, her experiences, her relationships. She gives it to you in a pretty raw, uncut format, and it makes it so real, so relatable. The place where we're at right now, she's 17, she's a teenage, unwed mother, and even though she has an imposing physical presence, she's about 6 foot tall, and she looks like she's much older, you can't help but feel for this young girl who's been kind of abandoned. You know, the people who have been in her life and who should have loved her, she's been abused, she's been taken advantage of, she's been separated from her parents at different points, she's been separated from the people who love her at different points, and now she's found her own love, her own child to love, and looking for a romantic partner. And of course, we're going through the motions of seeing her wanting to love people and wanting them to love her back, and having that disconnect between those two things. And it's a fascinating read. If you haven't already checked out the videos, if you haven't read the book, read it with me. So I'll link in the description box a playlist where I read these chapters, so if you haven't already checked them out, you can start and read along with me as well. Another book that I've been reading this week is Doris Lessing's The Sweetest Thing. This I'm reading for the Noble Women Read Along, hosted by Britta Bowler on her channel. I didn't make that much progress this week, but I'm still reading. This one is about Frances, a middle-aged mother. She's become a kind of house mother, or earth mother in this book. She's living in the 1960s. She has 2 sons with her ex-husband, Johnny, who's a communist now, but they're living in England. And her her sons are late teens, early 20s, and over the years they've collected an assortment of friends who've moved into the home and refused to leave because of their own estrangement from their parents. And so Frances has taken them in. She's taken on the responsibility for them, even when they're unappreciative and even antagonistic towards her. She acts very maternal towards them because she knows that someone needs to care for them, and if their parents aren't doing it, then she's going to step up. And it's interesting that Frances allows these children to inhabit her home, but then you find out that Frances is also not living in her own home. She's living in this house owned by her mother-in-law who lives in the upper floors. And because of a new person that they take into the home, this new person who needs both mothers, this new girl and her need forms a bridge between these 2 women, and so they both start to function in the same role as being these house mothers, adoptive mothers. The book is set in the 1960s, and so it links the permissiveness of the times, but it also shows the anti-establishment attitudes that these teenagers are developing, the fact that they feel like they can enjoy the benefits of life without having earned the right to. They feel like they should just live the benefits that their parents have fought for. These are children whose parents fought in the war, but they don't feel any responsibility towards the world in the same way. The author gives us a lot of details about this very unorthodox family and how the ex-husband Johnny, Comrade Johnny, the representative for the communist movement, how he cycles in and out of the home, feeling like he owns it, acting like he owns it, but not contributing towards it, and all of what that means for not just the family, but for the political spectrum on a whole. Looking forward to the discussion that we'll have as we get a little bit more into this as a group. And then for the books that I started this week, so on Wednesday, Kayla from Books and Lala started her Buzzword Readathon. This is her, I I think, 4th iteration of it, and I like to participate, but I forgot that it started on Wednesday, so I didn't start until today. So the first book that I'm going to be reading is Where Do You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. The buzzword this time is you, so this book has you in the title. And I started this one, I got to maybe about page 40 or so. This one is epistolary format, and so we have letters and text messages and emails going through, so it's actually a pretty easy read. I think I might even be able to finish this one today. So I'm doing the buzzword readathon. I am starting on Friday, so I'm probably going to carry mine over until next Thursday. I'm going to see how many books I can read this week that have the word you in the title. I didn't make an official TBR. I have this one, and I also have Give Me Your Hand by Megan Abbott that I'd like to get to. These are 2 books on my physical TBR that I wanted to read during this week for the buzzword readathon. So we'll see if I finish those and find something else. But I didn't really feel like going to the library and getting a bunch of books that have the word you in the title just so I could read a lot of books for the readathon. I have a huge TBR as it is. So I really like this one. I started reading it a couple of years ago and didn't get very far. It's about a teenage girl who she's gotten really good grades in school, and her parents promised that if she did get those good grades, she could have anything she wanted. And they thought that she might ask for a pony, even though they didn't want to give her a pony. But what she wanted was a trip to Antarctica. And as they're now planning this trip to Antarctica, her mother, who's an agoraphobic, disappears in the middle of planning it. But in the beginning of the book, we get the lead up to the situation, all the people around and the community that they live in, and the other parents from the school that B goes to. Bernadette is the mother, by the way, even though B is supposed to be the main character. This is not a YA book. Even though we're following a teenage girl in her school, this is an adult read, and it's fascinating that we have B, who's called Buzzy, and Bernadette has an online assistant from India who charges her 75 cents an hour to do admin duties online. It's fascinating the way she refuses to speak with people in real life, but she carries on this constant email correspondence with her virtual assistant. Fascinating. I might finish this one today, so you'll hear more about it when I do my buzzword readathon recap, or in my next Friday reads I'll tell you about it. Also started an Unrestored Woman by Shoba Rayo. This is a short story collection. Shoba Rayo is the author of Girls Burn Brighter, and I'm going to be doing a buddy read of this one with Kay, who's a subscriber here. She doesn't have her own channel, but we correspond on Goodreads, and I read the first story today, which is a title story. My comment on Goodreads as I updated my place in the book is it too early to give this book a 5-star rating? The title story is about a young Indian woman named Neela, who she's living during the time of partition, which is when India and Pakistan separated into 2 separate countries. One a state for Muslims, one a state for Hindus, and people who were living on the wrong side of the border started to experience violence. And Neela's husband, there's a report that he's been killed, and so she's widowed at 15 years old, and she goes to live in a camp with other women who've also been widowed from these random acts of violence. And there she befriends a young woman who is a little bit older, but they have this bond, and it reminded me so much of the 2 characters in Girls Burn Brighter, who their shared personal hell makes them that much closer. I'm going to be reading this one. I think we plan to read a story a day or something. I'm not sure. But I read the first story today. And the next book that I'm going to be trying to read in the next few days is Night Film by Marisha Pessel. This one I'm reading because of Beautifully Bookish Bethany's Patreon book club. I'm going to be reading this one in the next few weeks. I'm going to try to start it sometime this week, so I'll tell you about it. You'll probably hear more about it in my next video. Somehow I managed to talk about 8 books in this video. I didn't plan for this video to be quite so long, but I finished 2, I continued 2, I started 2, and I'm about to start 2 more. So that's Friday Reads. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more. Let's talk in the comments. Let me know what you've been reading this week. What's the book that you read, whether started or finished this past week, that you enjoyed the most? For me, I'm gonna say it was definitely Moon Tiger. Booker Prize winner. They get me every time. I love those books. Something about those books, those allegorical stories that are a story within a story within another story, I just love. So I'd love to hear your favorite read from the week. So let's talk down there, and until next time, happy reading.